cannot use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside Browns. There is an evacuation chair for use by disabled people who so wish in the corridor outside the Council Chamber Public Gallery. Alternatively, the area at the top of the marble staircase has been designated as a safe refuge where persons needing assistance should assemble. Thank you.
Thank you much, Jo. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Jo, are there any?
Yes, I've had apologies from Councillors Vic Clark, Paul Crossley, Doug Deacon, Grant Johnson, Bruce Shern, Dave Wood and Chris Watt.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Jo, can you announce those interests you've had so far?
Yeah, I haven't had any interest specifically declared to me, so do stick your hand up if you have anything. The monitoring officer has issued a general dispensation for all councillors with regard to agenda item 8, the members' allowances uplift, to enable members with potential disclosable pecuniary interests in relation to the remuneration for their roles as councillors to take part in the debate and vote. Failure to do so would impede the transaction of the business of the meeting. And there is also the ongoing dispensation for COVID-related reasons for a few councillors as well, which explains why a couple of councillors aren't here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 4 is announcements from the Chair or Chief Executive. You'll be pleased that there are none. Item 5, agenda, so any urgent business agreed by the Chair. Again, there is none. So now we move on to items from the public. This evening we have 4 speakers registered to speak, and they will have 3 minutes each, and then the group leaders will be able to ask factual questions if they so wish. Our first public speaker tonight is Bob Goodman, who doesn't seem to be here. He's not here. I know, but he's not. Welcome, Bob Goodman. You have 3 minutes to speak.
From the previous Conservative administration. How wrong was he? When the previous... Sorry, Chair, I'm not having people speaking over me.
I didn't hear that, but I'm going to give you extra time.
Thank you.
Because the microphone wasn't on.
When the previous administration controlled in 2015, the recycling rate was 50.4% and Bays 80th in the country. What then happened was, with the support of colleagues, I introduced a fortnightly collection for bags and encouraged residents to recycle. I remember only too well being bombarded with, "It will never work and you'll have to go back to recollection." Who said that? Well, cabinet members in this current administration. They should be ashamed of themselves. Following this introduction, the rates rose to 58.7% and Baines was 19th in the league table. When this council took control, the following year went back to 56.2%, 34th in the country. What have you done to improve the figures? Has the cabinet member been on the refuse lorries to see how they encounter the issues involved? This same cabinet member stopped private enforcement for dropping litter, and now our streets have more chewing gum and cigarette ends than there ever has been. I have to mention Charlton House debacle. Blame everyone else, but this council is responsible for allowing residents to suffer and still no resignations. What would you think if your parents were allowed to sit in their own urine for hours upon end? I have to finish on housing. Councillor Gly believes this development company of his has turned into a social housing company. I don't think the directors will agree when they earn their astronomical salaries they do. Where is this 100 social housing that they've so-called built? The 7 at Newbridge House has financial issues with the sell to ADL Peanuts and sell back to the council at full market value. Apparently there's to be 300 council houses in the Keys development, or was it the gasworks? Councillor Guy didn't seem to know between the two sites. Who is going to subsidise these properties? Well, that will be very interesting to see. And indeed, recently, Councillor Guy has changed from what he said to John Darwell on the bus subsidies. Apparently, there's going to be no bus subsidies in Baines. Oh, what a sorry state this council is in.
Thank you very much, Bob Goodman. Now I'll turn to the group leaders in turn to see if they have a factual question. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. I have no factual question.
Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, thank you. You raised some interesting points, but I don't have any factual questions. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Sorry, can I defer my factual question to Colin Blackburn, please?
Good evening, Mr. Goodman. Should John Darwell or the Radio Bristol political editor or the BBC Points West invite Councillor Guy back to Bristol to
Is that a factual question?
It's not about fact-checking the recent interview. It's about facts. Just asking a factual question.
Yes, I believe you should. I think it's important that the true facts of that interview comes out.
Councillor Moss.
Tempted to refer my question to Councillor Blackburn. However, no questions from me.
Thank you much, Councillor Moss, and thank you much, Bob Goodman. Our second speaker is Mark Strickland. I'd like to say you have 3 minutes when the green light goes on.
Hello, my name is Mark. I'm here to bring up the issue with the mobile phone networks here in Bath. Everybody in this room has experienced problems with mobile phone networks. They're causing problems with phone recharging points, scooters, the MyApp permits. Last night at about 6 o'clock, I was preparing for this. I put one post on social media asking if anybody else had any other common issues with the mobile phone network in Bath. Bridget from Roxbrook. I have to stand outside in the bottom of my garden to make a phone call. Amanda from Bathford. O2 in the centre of Bath is non-existent. It must send tourists crazy. Hannah, Poets Corner. So why does Bath not have 5G already? Sam Bellbrook. Recently spent 20 minutes trying to park, work-related, and have given up, as that wouldn't work. Hugely frustrating. John, Newbridge. My difficulty with O2 is frequently losing signal within our home in Newbridge. Patrick, Claverton. O2 has 3G at best in the majority of Bath Centre. Being a tourist hotspot, 5G should be addressed to boost all phone signals. Lowry, Newbridge Road. I've missed hospital and GP appointments due to poor phone signals. Amber, Lark Hall. I have massive issues with BT Mobile. My phone, business phone doesn't work in my city centre office, and I'm on EE for personal mobile. Barbara, Lower Weston. O2 has become so bad at Coombe Park I can no longer make a phone call from my mobile while at home. If I receive a call, I have to head towards the garden, which is not easy while waiting for a knee replacement. Hacken, O2, awful. Peter, 10 times O2 SIM cards at work, all awful. Mark, it's well known I visit lots of customers who confirm this issue. Ree, Vodafone in the vicinity of Waitrose. This is exacerbated when trying to log into the pod point of the charged electric vehicle in the Podium car park, as the chargers are on the second level where there's no phone signal whatsoever. I often have to go to Milsom Street to get a signal. Again, a similar issue in Southgate where each floor has chargers but no mobile phone signals. O2 is useless. EE is pants. I rely on mobile data for work when out and about and struggling to get any mobile data when 4G and O2. I could go on and on and on and on, and none of these people I know. These are just people who responded. Now, this isn't a particularly political point, but the Lib Dems have been in charge for 4 years. The phone services are deteriorating. It's getting worse. Bath was on Radio 2 this afternoon on the Jeremy Vine show about how appalling it is trying to get signals to park and all sorts of parking issues. I'm not here to point fingers and say anybody's done anything wrong, but what I'm here to say is who is going to sort this out and when is it going to get sorted out? The Lib Dems have all sorts of weird reasons not to be fixing this, and guaranteed the Conservatives will fix this if elected, because this is just no good. We can't carry on like this. It's just, everybody in this room must have had issues.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you. Now I'll ask the 4 group leaders in turn if they have any factual questions. Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Are you aware that 5G... Sorry, apologies. Are you aware that a 5G mast was erected in Newbridge Ward in 2022, where you're standing, as I believe, as a Conservative candidate, with the full support of both your Lib Dem councillors? This is despite being lobbied against. Are you aware of that, yes or no?
Do I press the button or just answer? I'm not getting into who has planted what mast where. The point is, there are...
You asked a factual question.
Am I aware of the masts?
Are you aware of the 2 local councillors at the time supporting that 5G mast?
I'm not aware of who has supported any mast. It's not something I've looked into.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland, you have clearly illustrated how frustrated people of Bath are with inadequate 4G and 5G mobile phone networks available to Bath's residents and businesses.
And the question is?
I'm just going to add a moment, Chairman, with your appraisal. What can you tell me about the next generation of 6G mobile networks?
That isn't a factual question on his statement. So, Councillor Walker.
No factual questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moss.
No factual questions.
Thank you very much. We now move on. Thank you very much, Mark, for your contribution this evening to full council. Next public speaker is Simon Banks. Good evening, Simon. You have 3 minutes when the that goes on. Okay?
Yep. Thanks so much. I'm here today representing the residents opposed to development of the English Combe Lane field and the 5,000 residents who signed our petition last year. I'd like to raise the question of urban green spaces and start by illustrating using the example of the current planning application in the space we know as the Tuper Field, otherwise land to the rear of English Combe Lane. The use of green spaces for development always engenders debate and often extreme reactions. The Tufer Field has been the subject of attempted development for 40 years, usually failing when the practical difficulty of site development is realised. Nevertheless, the site is constantly in successive development plans, usually as housing, either commercial or special needs accommodation. In 2007, planners agreed that the site should be removed from the forthcoming plan. At the time, there was pressure on the authority to meet a notional housing build target, and the inspector decided that she did not believe the council's planning projections for site availability, and that this site should be reinstated with its target of 43 homes. Subsequent events showed that the council officers were correct in their assessment, and that more than sufficient housing sites became available for the duration of the plan. Nevertheless, the Tuferfield site remained in the plan and has been rolled over into subsequent plans without further investigation. The reason given is that specific site concerns will be addressed during planning permission deliberations. However, when the planning committee met to discuss this particular development, the reason given for granting permission was it's in the development plan. This seems to be a circular argument. The plan relies on the planning permission, process to determine viability. But the planning permission process relies on the development plan. Much has changed since this site was first mooted, then abandoned for development. There is much more awareness of the vital role urban green spaces play in the health and well-being of the city. Green spaces are now universally recognised as being not only ecologically important, both in terms of biodiversity and mitigating climate change, but also a significant asset for people's mental health. I'd like to see the Council adopt the notion of a community asset value to be placed on urban green spaces with the presumption of no development. The asset value should be at least equal to the notional monetary value of the space if developed, thus a premium that recognises additional value such as unique or special ecology or placement within densely populated areas. The era of cheap building on greenfield sites must stop. There is more. My statement continues, but I think you have copies of it, so I will finish there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Councillor Guy, do you have a factual question on the statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll defer my question to Councillor Davies, please.
Thank you very much.
Simon, thank you very much indeed for your statement. As you know, I've met with residents on 2 occasions to discuss our proposals for the supported housing scheme.
Factual question.
Would you be happy to join the next meeting that we've committed to discuss the timings and the proposal of our development on the land, including the technical studies that are taking place?
Of course.
Thank you.
Councillor Pritchard, I'm quite happy myself to remind speakers whether they're factual questions or not. If you'd like to ask one yourself.
I take your point, Chairman. I just didn't want you to miss it on that occasion.
Thank you very much for your help.
Yes, it's answering Simon then. Simon, are you aware that the policy requires that should development be permitted, ecological interests must be assessed, identified and protected? If further assessment evidence, as you suggest, shows that the development is not appropriate on the site at all, then future applications could be refused, and these would be material considerations that indicate it should be refused rather than permitted.
I am aware. Thank you. Yes.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Simon, for your statement. I agree with you on the criteria at the start of the new plan, but no factual questions.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Moss.
No factual questions, but I think your points about asset of community value and open space are interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for coming on this evening, and hopefully the meeting will be arranged for you to attend. Thank you. Our last public speaker tonight is David Fess.
Good evening. My name is David Ferris and I'd like to speak to you about residence parking zones. I've lived in Kensington Place all my life. It's next to the busiest road in the city, the A4, the London Road. It's a mile flat walk from Kensington and Grosvenor to the centre of town. Park and stride was invented on those 2 streets. If there's a need for an RPZ, why was it not done in Kensington and Grosvenor first? Question I have for you. You've undertaken consultation with the residents and had limited positive response. However, the council still seems to be pushing forward with this project. The front page of the Chronicle for the 22nd of December last year was, and I quote, "Outrage as the RPZs go ahead." Are RPZs for the benefit of the residents or just a way of increasing revenues? I believe the current administration wants to increase the revenue stream from parking, etc., and by some £3 million. This at a time of the highest taxation in 60 plus years, a cost of living crisis driven by the war in Ukraine and COVID. What are the obvious outcomes of RPZs? Displacement of traffic. You move people parking from one street into another. It doesn't solve anything unless the overall plan is to, in the fullness of time, make everywhere an RPZ. There's no park and ride on the east side of the city. I believe there's proposals for mini ones in Box and Corsham and then to shuttle people in from there. In Lambridge, Lidl have put in a planning application to build on Bath Rugby Ground or part of it. It's not a greenfield site, it was quoted by one councillor here. That would make an ideal mini park and ride. It's also at a point where the A4 and the A46, the two busiest roads, converge. It makes perfect sense. It's also got a bus lane right next to it, and it's 300 yards from the roundabout. It makes perfect sense. I know that we can't use the areas that we've discussed before for flood reasons and the fact that the land's been given away now. That's all I have to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you much, David, for your contribution. And now ask Councillor Guy if you have a factual question on the statement.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. President. No factual questions.
Councillor Pritchard.
Yes. Are you able to suggest how you would negate the need for RPZs on the east of the city, specifically the ones proposed for Snow Hill and Camden?
Well, the mini park and rides in Box and Caution, I believe, are non-starters. The place to put a mini park and ride is the Bath Rugby Ground, the piece that's being proposed to be sold off to Lidl's. There's more ground there that could be used, i.e. the other pitches, and they could be displaced back up to Clatterton to where the old civil service ground was, which is now vacant. It has all the infrastructure, it has all the buildings. You could build a really quite substantial park and ride there. Therefore, you wouldn't have the park and stride, you wouldn't have the need for people to park off street, and we would end up with the dream of the last 2 or 3 councils of a park and ride in the east of the city.
Thank you. Well done answer. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
No factual questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moss.
Would you like to see a full strategy for RPZs with a pathwide circulation plan?
I think RPZs are a waste of time. I think they serve no purpose other than generating revenue. I think the fact that the consultations, that respectfully they were a joke. The papers say so, everybody says so.
Is that a yes or a no?
No.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David. You round off our public speakers this evening. Now we move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the local plan partial update and modifications, and the Cabinet member, Councillor Tim Ball, will introduce this item. He's got 5.
Can you all hear me properly? I've got one microphone, it's not working properly. Have you heard? Okay, thank you. In open debate, can I first thank the work of council officers who worked really hard in getting us position that we're able... That's what places were there. That's it. Right. I'll start again if I can, please. In open debate, can I first thank the work of council officers who have worked really hard in getting us to position and able to adopt the local plan partial update at tonight's meeting. It's also recognised the work of members of the LDF steering group for analysing the policy we've been proposed, and particularly Councillor Jackson across there, whose dodgy internet causes a few problems during the actual online meetings, but we do recognise the work been carried out. In 2020, the council commenced work on preparing a partial update to the core strategy and placemaking plan. We as a council took a bold step in looking at a local plan partial update that was brought about by the difficulties in progressing a sub-regional plan for the West of England and the resulting delays in preparing a full new local plan. It was decided to update parts of the local plan through the local plan partial update to address urgent issues. These included ensuring our planning policy framework to better address the climate and ecological emergencies. We are leading much of the country in responding to the climate and ecological emergencies. And now this means that through adoption of the LPPU tonight, we are at the forefront nationally of developing such policies. Preparation of the LPPU included public consultation, stakeholder engagement and member involvement. This was very challenging during the pandemic, but undertaken using old and new methods, such as successful webinars. It's really important that Council adopts the LPPU for the following main reasons. The LPPU means we have an up-to-date plan for determining plan applications. We have a second. It's funny when a screen suddenly bounces on you, isn't it? Planning application, a strong platform preparing a full new local plan. Ensures our planning policies better address the climate and ecological emergencies, including requiring and delivering new development that is net zero carbon, reducing embodied carbon in development, encouraging renewable energy provision of the right scale in the most suitable places, requiring a minimum of 10% biodiversity net gain on major applications, replenish its housing supply, meaning we can meet the core strategy requirement in a planned way that gives us better control of future location and form of housing development. Further improvements are transport policies so they facilitate and encourage people using more sustainable modes of transport. Emphasise the focus of purpose-built student accommodation on campus enables the council to better manage off-campus purpose-built student accommodation by limiting it to what is clearly and demonstrably needed. In proposal recommendations, I'll move 2.1, 2.2, 2.4 and 2.5. In 2.3, there is a change the word to reflect the supplementary paper and explain. It's recommended that the LPP is adopted, including primarily for the purpose of determining plan applications in accordance with legislation, i.e. planning applications must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Once adopted, the LPPU become part of the development plan in Baines and will have full statutory weight in determining plan applications. Members will be aware that supplementary paper has been circulated and this must be taken into account in adopting the LPPU. As set out in the supplementary paper, some paragraphs in Appendix 3 LPPU proposed to be adopted have been included in error, i.e. the inspectors recommended that they should be removed. The paragraphs relate to policy SCR7 on net zero requirements for non-residential development. The paragraphs talk about BREEAM excellent for such proposals. However, it's not required by the policy, which requires operational carbon emissions are reduced by 100%.
Sorry, Councillor Bull, can you just hold on? Has anyone got their mic on? Because we're getting terrible feedback or from somewhere. Can people just check? Or... Okay. Sorry, I can just hear it in...
The policy requirement is clearer than BREEAM excellent. Therefore, the paragraphs need to be deleted. In moving the recommendation 2.3 to adopt the LPPU is now proposed additional wording as been circulated to you, but I will read it. Adopt the Baines local plan parcel update as modified in 2.1 and 2.2 as set out in Appendix 3 as amended in a supplementary paper, including for the purpose of Section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. I therefore move 2.3 as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. I believe Councillor Pritchard, you would like to second the motion.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm quite enthusiastic about seconding this proposal. It needs to be recognised that the main modifications recommended by the inspector to make the plan sound are the same as those on which we have already consulted. In effect, it amounts only to a couple of future minor text changes. The adoption of the LPPU is important as it helps the Council deliver its priorities. It ensures that we have an up-to-date local plan, enables the Council to maintain a 5-year land supply and therefore have a greater control over the location, form of housing development in the short term whilst we prepare a new local plan. Incidentally, we are the only UA in the west of England to prepare a partial update, and it has proven to be the right thing to do, especially given delays in the now halting the WECA spatial development strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pritchard. Currently I have 3 speakers on the list, but please make sure you show if you'd like to speak. I have Councillor Paul May and then Councillor Warren.
Chair, thank you. I wish to support the motion. It's going to affect all residents who live in Bath and North East Somerset, whether in a minor or major way. Going back to the original local plan, core strategy and placemaking plan, this update has been worked on with all political groups being involved. When you see any new update, it's easy to miss the quality of the original plan and delivery of housing numbers that have been taking place to date. And there has to be a credit to the original documents that we've actually made that progress. However, within the original timeframe, The world and this council has changed significantly, and whilst we require a sensible, proper 5-year housing plan that Councillor Pritchard mentioned, delivery, we have embraced joint political aims of the climate emergency, the ecological emergency and the impact of students on the Bath community in particular. I represent a small, vulnerable community adjacent to the city of Bristol, and whether WECA or the city try to force Baines into take inappropriate developments, we will have the strength of this update as protection against unreasonable solutions being found that harm the valuable green belt that we all value and the green corridors and the valuable habitats. Indeed, the pressure of net zero developments and 10% biodiversity gains will mean a significant sustainable approach as we move to the new local plan. I see our green belt as a valuable asset which we must value and provide protective evidence moving forward against unreasonable development pressures. So looking forward, if approved this evening, it will place Baines in the strongest possible position to produce a new local plan and evidential defences as we move forward if the government do as they promised to change stipulated housing numbers into recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. May I have Councillor Warren and then Councillor Jackson?
Chair, our local plan partial update was prompted with the key aim of providing a response in planning policy to our declarations of climate and ecological emergency. It breaks new boundaries with its new process for identifying land for renewables, as well as taking our park and ride sites out of the green belt to permit installation of renewables. However, I want to focus tonight on energy efficiency in new build housing. Nationally, the UK's housing stock is some of the least energy efficient in Europe, due in part to the difficulty for those local councils who seek better performance from developers of requiring this under national planning policy. Emissions from the built environment account for 66% of carbon emissions in Baines, of which residential buildings contribute 38%. This is why it's essential that we prioritise trailblazing standards of sustainable construction in Baines by adopting the updated policy this evening. If we vote in support tonight, as of this evening, Bath and North East Somerset Council will be the first local authority in the country to have successfully implemented a net zero new housing policy that specifically limits total energy use and space heating and requires sufficient on-site renewable energy to match total energy use. Our groundbreaking new energy-based targets are significant as they're much clearer to enforce than our previous ones. In exceptional circumstances where offsetting of renewables provision is permitted, the funds raised will be used to install solar photovoltaic on low-income households and social housing. No local authority has hitherto had this approach adopted in a local plan. In addition to creating truly net zero homes that will halt greenhouse gas contributions from new housing, the policy will virtually outlaw gas boilers in new build, whilst ensuring comfortable, well-insulated net zero homes for residents that are cost-effective to heat during a cost of living crisis. It will also increase our district's energy security, whilst boosting rooftop renewables installation around the district, so minimising the need for greenfield renewable sites in meeting our generation targets. The adoption of the policy at Bath and North East Somerset sets a precedent that these standards can be implemented in planning policy, and it encourages other authorities to do the same. This policy can now be replicated across the country to drive delivery of net zero homes nationwide. So I want to particularly thank officers, local campaigners, and even national campaigning organisations such as Client Earth, who have provided the Council with so much support in reaching this incredible result this evening. I'm delighted to support the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warren. We have Councillor Jackson now, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Chair. Having attended Mendip District Council Planning Board yesterday to represent Westfield Parish Council, and through them the residents of Westfield who will be impacted by the construction of 272 houses at the White Post in Midsummer Norton, and where we found there are elements of their local plan part 2 which are in question, I have to congratulate our planning policy team and all the officers who've done so much work to bring this great volume of policies to birth. However, the point that Councillor Hughes, who accompanied me on behalf of the Midsummer Norton residents, and I made was that you must consult, and this of course is where the planning inspector for the Mendip local plan pointed out the error of their ways. Consultation is everything, and I do hope that going forward and into the local plan this lesson will be learnt in this authority, and that includes the residents of North East Somerset as well as perhaps the more I can't say savvy, but perhaps I mean plugged in, residents of Bath. Here we have a document full of noble aspirations about climate emergency, climate change. We've just heard the detail of the gas boilers, but it's undermined by the lack of practicalities, the lack of buses. How can you possibly talk about addressing climate emergency when you are cutting the subsidies for buses that serve remote rural communities where people will have to travel by car or not live there? And we have also, as this Silver Street, this White Coast application demonstrates, no pavements. How do you get safely from one part of a village to another or to the next village if there is no pavement? Carrying on, we've got 5,000 unbuilt houses with planning permission in this area. It would be a good idea to get them built first. However, my final point is there is, it seems, sad to say, no mention of Westfield in all these pages except to say we're going to have no houses. Well, that accords with our made neighbourhood plan, but even so, I do hope that going forward into the development of the local plan, we will get more consideration of the Somer Valley and its needs and the aspirations of its citizens. And, you know, it's all so Bath-based. We find this with the SPD, which has just been passed by the Cabinet member.
Bring your remarks to a close.
This is my last sentence.
Your time. Come on then.
You can't stop.
Depends how long the sentence is.
This is a tendency that we find in the SPD for the new enforcement policy. No mention of our aspirations in rural areas, and the same with the priorities of the Police Commissioner's report. Please stop it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. We have Councillor Wright, and then after that, I was going to say, I'll speak, we have Councillor first.
The effort made by all councillors working cross-party to deliver improved planning rules is substantial. I would like to thank Councillor Timble for leading the local partial plan update and supplementary planning documents, and the officers for working so hard to make this possible, and also this planning inspector whose amendments have strengthened the report. The Green Party will be supporting the report and amendments. This urgent update to local planning rules in Baines is required because of lack of green leadership by national government, who need to overhaul national planning policy framework, which currently fails local residents, biodiversity and tackling the climate crisis. It is only through collective action in the form of system change that significant carbon reductions will be enabled. The quickest way to achieve this is through direct political action. The report tonight in the form of the LPPU does provide an opportunity for political action for system change at a local level. Voting for this report means that all future building developments in Baines will be required to take greater account for their constructions in ways that benefit the planet and our descendants. These necessary stringent regulations will enable sustainable construction and net gain for biodiversity and all-round improved emissions levels. However, let us be clear that this report is only a stepping stone towards greater accountability for the collective good. The need to reduce carbon emissions is acute, and for example, this report still allows developers to pay into a carbon offsetting fund to avoid delivering on any actual reduction in their carbon emissions. The Green Party is delighted to hear that the Council is planning to use this offsetting fund to retrofit its social housing stock, but what is really needed is for developers to be required to only build sustainably. We would also argue that the Council should begin an immediate district-wide retrofitting programme to keep buildings warmer, greener and help all residents face the cost of living crisis. This report also gives guidance on walking and cycling standards, parking, ultra-low emission vehicles and travel plans, all of which the Green Party is happy to support. But this guidance needs to have actual teeth, and this can only be delivered by political will within the Council. To date, we have seen failure by this administration to deliver a safe cycle route on North Road to the University of Bath, despite this report allowing for the development of accommodation for a further 870 students in Claverton. If the Council is honestly concerned with delivering on the climate emergency, it must deliver the necessary sustainable transport infrastructure or be held accountable. The success of this report will depend upon good monitoring and regulatory action being taken by officers. This requires full political support and a budget to ensure all actions are monitored in full and regulatory action is pursued where necessary. It is only through collective, ongoing system change that the climate emergency will be overcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor White. Councillor Furze, and then Councillor Waite, and we have one other speaker after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, in many ways, I'm pleased to have followed Councillor White from the Green Party because she would be the first to say that I'm not the greenest person in this room, and probably far from it. Yeah, but and she picks up many good points, which Councillor Ball also picked up: the land supply, the housing numbers, the transport improvements, the housing construction improvements, which was probably the best thing in here. Yeah, the electrical generation targets, which I would question, but they're here. Yeah, and Councillor from Westfield, I shall mention Westfield just in case, talking about the lack of buses in here. So, there are some issues in here which have not been picked up regarding transport. Yeah. Now I'll rattle through a number of these. Policy ED1B, which is about the change of use. Although it talks very nicely about the change of use from office space to a residential accommodation, parts of the city centre in Bath do suffer from the fact that this change of use policy is used at the wrong time, and regularly I have to challenge planning officers about its change of use. Just take, for example, the university building opposite Churchill Bridge. That should be office accommodation and not student accommodation, for example, because it's close to major transport hubs, and I'm sure our Cabinet Member for Transport would support me on that. This plan signals the increase in student numbers, which other people have talked about, which I think from a city centre point of view is a real concern. From the wider Bath point of view is even a bigger concern, although there are policies in here about trying to control the number of HMOs, but it does talk heavily about purpose-built student accommodation, of which I'm on record I was a fan of about 15 years ago, thinking it would suck out demand from the city and the family housing in this city, but it hasn't. All it's done is enable both universities, probably Bath University more so than Bath Spa, to increase its student numbers quite substantially on year. And until we control those student numbers, we have a real difficulty in managing any of these policies. There are but the big one to me in here, which I'm surprised Councillor Wright didn't pick up, very rarely I'm on the same side of the debate as her, but she didn't pick this one up, was about the new multi-storey car parks plan for the University of Bath. Now, we talk about a sustainable policy, this is great, and there are some great things in it, but these additional brand new multi-storey car parks being planned at Claverton campus for the university are completely outrageous in my view. So, although there's some great things in here, so I cannot vote against them, Mr. Chairman, but I will be abstaining on that point. Thank you. But I will be in the room to abstain, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Furze. Like I said, there were two other speakers, Councillor Waite and then Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. The basis of this LPPU I support. I think it's very strong on the green agenda. I think we've stepped forward in considerable ways to look at the way houses are built. But sadly, I speak as a Keynsham councillor, and in the plan the current plan that we have, the inspector said very clearly that Keynsham had reached its limit. It was full. The congestion in the town is becoming more and more significant as the houses are built which were part of the old plan. The current updated plan has taken 2 safeguarded fields from Greenbelt, which were supposed to be safeguarded until the end of the plan. This update takes both of those fields for development, which means that along the A4 and into Shendag Road there will be approximately 300, just under 300 houses with no infrastructure, no obvious way for the traffic to go along from these sites. Now, it's an easy thing to do because there's safeguarded land, but safeguarded land till the end of this plan. That is not the case. This is the way it is. The Withys Park development already has had successful planning applications on it, and yet it is safeguarded land. As I speak now, it is safeguarded land. The Withys Park development, which is next to the Higger development, has also had some planning applications to it, and yet that is safeguarded land until this plan is agreed. So these are greenfield sites. I'm really pleased that there's a green update, and I'm really pleased with the way they've done it, but the green update, the green carbon neutral aspect of the Minsmere Road site is actually going to be in another part of Keynsham, so it won't actually benefit the people that are going to be living in those sites. So though I applaud the whole idea of changing planning, making it greener, making it better, I do feel, as the Ward Councillor for Keynsham East, that we have been picked out for more than we deserve, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wade. Our last speaker is Councillor Davis, and I'll go back to Councillor Ball.
And I'll be quite brief. This partial update is to help clarify some of the situations that we've had, as I speak as a member of the Planning Committee here, where sometimes it's not quite clear what is wanted. I think this clarifies quite a few of the positions that we want and has updated some of the policies that we really wanted clear and, as people have said, updated. There are holes in it, as people have identified, but can I only suggest that those people encourage their communities to make sure they engage now with the local plan, because this is where the changes can now be made. Because this is, if you like, one of my colleagues in the group earlier said it's like a sticking plaster. I'd say it's more than a sticking plaster. It's just clarified the position for now, but we do need to make sure that the various points that people are concerned about are engaged on in the next stage. And I have already been to one of the local plan workshops the other day in Keynsham, where there is easily opportunity to highlight issues, many of which have been raised today. So can I encourage people, if this isn't quite right, which it may not be in lots of cases, you then move on to the next stage of the local plan. So for now, this has certainly worked and helped us clarify our positions, but yes, the next stage is to work with the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis, for that excellent end to the debate. Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Ball to sum up before we move to the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very pleased to sum up. Westfield, Councillor Jackson, Radstock, Councillor Dando, and we must mention Porton for the two Porton councillors present this evening. It's appreciated. So we now move on, remembering this is a local plan partial update. It's not a new local plan. There's only so far we can go with an update. It's amending, adapting, adjusting policies to make sure we get the best of the environmental impacts out, the ecological impacts into the plan itself. Also updating the housing numbers to ensure we have sufficient housing supply to go through. If we hadn't done this LPPU, we were in danger in 2 years of having insufficient land supply. Would have meant development where you really don't want it. I know some are very concerned, like Andy is this evening, about development where he doesn't want it as well, in Keynsham. But we are in a situation where we have to find sufficient land to make sure there is enough to go round. Councillor Fur's comments regarding the parking at the university This is not additional parking, it's replacement parking, surface car parking going to multi-storey. We cannot alter policy to remove this parking at the moment. A full local plan can do that. We are moving along the road to actually make it more difficult for HMOs to appear, to ensure we actually get student accommodation on campus. This is in transit, a road in progress. It's not the ultimate solution. This will come in the full local plan which will follow. As Councillor Davis quite rightly said, please engage in that now. That is the transformational issue. I remember presenting the core strategy in 2014. This council, those who are on there remember, we split the actual debate in about 6 items we voted on because we couldn't agree with each other. I know those present remember us doing that, and we clearly got that core strategy through. This is a good update. This is well worth going forward with, and I recommend it to you this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Ball, for summing up. We now move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations as printed? Yeah. And anyone against? None. And any get my teeth in. Abstentions. Three. Okay. So that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Item 8 on our agenda is a member's allowance uplift, and could I invite Councillor Samuels to move the paper?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, members will know that the decisions on the levels for members' allowances are ones for this body alone, and the practice in previous years for quite a long time has been that the uplift in members' allowances outside the exceptional review that we had last year is linked to the National Joint Council's award, the negotiation between the local government employers and the unions. Well, this year, the agreement between the unions and the local government employers was different to previous years. So whereas in previous years it had, and this relates to the 2022 pay year, in previous years this had always been a percentage addition, sometimes variable between different pay scales, but generally a percentage. This year, for the first time in many years, maybe ever, a flat rate pay award of 1925 was applied to each spinal point in the local government pay scales. And that, of course, had the benefit at the national level of directing pay assistance to the lower paid employees across local government. That did give us a little bit of a problem because our policy was to link to the percentage rise, and as members will know, particularly on some of the lower allowances, that would have led to a very distorted additional award. So ourselves and Bristol City Council, who share the same independent panel, have looked at this at our request, and the recommendation that they've come up with is set out in the report. I think the important thing here to remember is that this is, of course, never a good timing, and I think at the moment this is an award going back to April 22 because the pay settlement was only reached recently and goes back to that period. The issue, almost certainly, if local government employers follow the same line with the trade unions next year, it may occur again, but that's in the future, we don't know. So the recommendation from the panel is that across the board a 4.04 increase be applied. That is considerably less at certain allowances than would have been the case if 1925 had been added to the basic allowances and the special responsibility allowances. So the recommendation is there for you, the appendix setting out the individual amounts for each allowance set out in the appendix to the report. So members, you are invited to consider recommendations at 2.1 and 2.2, and just before you do, I would like to just put on record for the Council the work of the independent panel who turned this round in a fairly short period of time as they did for Bristol, and we have to thank them for that. So, Chair, with that, I move the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Samuels. Councillor Walker, I believe you're seconding.
I am. So happy to second the recommendation that the basic allowance and special responsibilities allowance be paid to members and increased by 4.04% and backdated to April 22. I would like to thank the panel and their recommendation that elected members should be remunerated fairly for the duties that they carry out in public life.
Thank you very much. Councillor Walker, I have seen no other indications of councillors wanting to speak. Councillor Samuels, you have the right to sum up. Do you need to say anything else?
I don't think I need to add anything to my introductory remarks, Chair.
Therefore, we move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour?
That's fine, yes, thank you.
All those against? And any can't say it again. Abstentions?
Yeah, that is carried.
That is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to the last item on the agenda, which is statements from councillors. And this evening we have one from Councillor Kumar on adult social care. Councillor Kumar, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make some comments regarding the scandal, I repeat, the scandal at Charlton House. Everybody in this chamber is upset by what happened in this council-run care home. When something goes very wrong, the appropriate response from politicians in charge should be humility and contrition, not avoiding culpability. The facts are plain. In May last year, an inspection of Charlton House told the council, which is in the inspector's own words, it required improvement and it is in breach of regulations. But by October, just 5 months after, a further inspection found the situation was much worse, with terrible example of neglect and abuse. Councillors and the public will rightly wonder what happened over the 5 months from the initial first report. How could things get worse? These are legitimate and very important questions, Chair. They should be treated respectfully. Throwing glib insults back, as one or two in this administration have done, that shows a lack of respect to the opposition, but much worse to the victims and the families. My wife and I have been through this difficult experience of having to move a very loved one, our own mother-in-law or mother, which we call, into a care home. This report has shaken us both. Many people across Baines will be feeling the same, Chair. I watched the scrutiny panel discussion this week. It was disappointing to hear what seems to be excuses, blaming the government or COVID or Brexit for what happened. Rather than making excuses, how much more honourable would it be to accept the blame, to admit mistakes, and to clearly explain what will change to stop this happening again, not only a mere apologies on BBC News. Some things are too important to play political games with. Some things are too important to play political games with. I hope even now in its final weeks that this administration will start to listen and to learn. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kumar. Given this is a statement from councillors, I now will go to group leaders to see if they have any factual questions on the statement from Councillor Kumar. Councillor Guy.
I have no factual questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pritchard.
I have no factual questions, but the presentation was very apt.
Councillor Walker.
No factual questions, thank you.
And finally, Councillor Moss. Thank you very much. So that means, I'm not doing well tonight. That means we conclude the meeting. Thank you much for your attendance and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thank you.